As you all know, or some of you, I'm Nicole Lee. I'm presenting this based on the College Student Mental Health Certificate, which is the program I am currently in, but about to graduate with the certificate. In this presentation, I'm going to tell you what College Student Mental Health is. I'm going to also give you tips on how to recognize mental health in students and ways to approach students, because approach is important when it comes to seeing things in students, and sometimes you don't know what to say to them. So I'm just going to use the arrow. So I did an interview a couple semesters ago, and I interviewed Ms. Tammy Nobles, who was the director of the Office of Student Engagement at the time. And she explained to me what the mission statement of the Office of Student Engagement was, to provide a comprehensive program of activities and services that will enhance the student's experience and allow for learning to continue beyond the classroom, which is why I know you all work with organizations and things like that, and all forms of activity on the campus. So student organizations and things like that. So college student mental health, mental health itself is defined as a person's condition with regard to their physical and emotional well-being. Mental health is all-encompassing. It's about what goes on in your life and how you handle it and things like that. So emotional, social, psychological well-being and things like that is what involves mental health. When I interviewed Ms. Tammy Nobles, I asked her what she thought were some challenges that students deal with when it comes to even seeking help for mental health. And these are some of the things she said: being able to identify the signs of a mental illness, including depression, eating disorders, substance abuse, and suicide. And this is not only for the students, but for the staff. Sometimes staff can't recognize these things in students. Also trying to help people who don't recognize that they need it. We have a lot of students that come to Lincoln and sometimes they come here because they're just trying to get away from home, or whatever reason, they just want to get an education. Some of them just are trying to get away, and some of them don't know that they need help. Also, mental health stigma from peers, cultural beliefs, or non-belief of mental illness. Some people don't believe that mental illness exists, or the understanding of mental health issues. Some people don't understand what those issues are. Also, students do not want to be stigmatized or labeled. So they generally don't seek help when they need it. If they recognize they need it, they don't want that stigma on them, so they won't seek help. So stigma is a really big thing when it comes to mental illness. That's actually one of the biggest things people talk about. I don't want to be viewed as this crazy person or something like that. So we'll talk a little bit about stigma. And there are two types of stigma that college students deal with. Self-stigma. It's when you basically look at yourself and say, I'm something. You're pointing fingers at yourself. You basically can't imagine something, something outside of yourself could be causing an issue. It's me. And sometimes when college students deal with something like that, they develop this attitude of, why try? I'm just gonna quit. I can't do anything right, I'm just gonna quit. So it's that voice inside yourself that says, I'm dumb, I'm crazy, I can't make it, I can't focus, and things like that. So you ever heard the saying, it's not what people say about you that counts, it's how you deal with what people say about you? Well, people who deal with self-stigma don't generally know how to deal with the things that are happening to them. So they adopt that attitude, why try? It's internalized. And then we have public or social stigma. This is not pointing fingers at yourself, this is other people pointing fingers at you. Even if someone recognizes you have a problem or have an illness, then, and we've seen it, you know, oh, they're crazy. They're not depressed. They just, you know, they're making things up and things like that. So, and one thing we need to understand is that dealing with social stigma can be very detrimental if we do not pay attention to students who are depressed or who are having issues with eating disorders and things like that. That could lead to something much worse. So, now that we talked about that, let's talk about some statistics. As of 2018, just last year, there were 5 major mental health concerns, and there are a lot more mental health concerns, but 5 major ones: addiction, suicide, suicidal thoughts, suicidal behaviors, depression, anxiety, and eating disorders. Everyone has some form of anxiety. Everyone. Doesn't mean that you have mental illness. That's just a natural thing. 1 in 4 students have a diagnosable illness. Depression is diagnosable. Anxiety is diagnosable. 40% of students do not seek help. It's a large number. 80% feel overwhelmed with responsibilities. And then 86% withdraw from college before completing their degree. That's more than way more than half. It's a lot of students who enroll and then drop out because they can't handle what's going on. Now I put this slide after more current to show you how much those numbers have increased. In 2012, 64% of students no longer wanted to attend college because of mental health issues. And that leaped to 86 in just 6 years. 1 in 7 students reported engaging in abnormally reckless behavior. That's one thing that you'll see later, that you would need to recognize that there's a problem. And some other statistics. And if you all want a copy of this, I can always send it to you. Mental illness is more common among college students than it was a decade ago, with most young people seeking treatment for depression and anxiety, because those are the most common ones that we see. So a study presented by the American Psychological Association found that the number of students on psychiatric medicines increased more than 10% points over the last 10 years. And I think that's completely shocking. So let's talk about some of those illnesses. Depression. Depression is a common but serious mood disorder marked by symptoms of feelings of hopelessness and sadness, loss of interest in hobbies. I mean, I know you all see a lot of students, and there are some students who are really happy-go-lucky, and then all of a sudden, boom, they don't want to do anything anymore. They're not smiling anymore. They don't come to visit you at your office anymore, maybe. And I know a lot of people come visiting you, and if you start seeing that diminish, then there may be something to look at. Insomnia, they're not getting any sleep, low appetite, restlessness, irritability, and then thoughts of death or suicide attempts. These are some of the things you look for. If you see these signs in students, these are some of the things that you would do. This is how you approach. Always be respectful. I know that sometimes we use depression loosely. Oh, I'm so sad, I'm so depressed. But it's not just that, you know. People use the word love really loosely, and it's not always love. but we have to make sure that we respect the person if they feel like they're depressed. It doesn't matter if they're just sad or something like that. Maybe they're feeling that way. We never blame them for how they're feeling. You know, maybe you should have done this, maybe you should have done that. That'll run them away. And have realistic expectations. You know, you're not just gonna be able to talk to someone and then boom, they're cured. You know, they may still feel depressed. Consistent emotional support. Make sure that they know that you really care. Don't just sit there and, oh, okay, yeah, I hear you, you know, stuff like that. Know that they understand that you really care. Encourage them to talk, because talking is more important than anything. And listen to what they're saying. You know, give feedback. So I'm hearing that you're saying this, you know, try to understand what they're saying. And always give them hope for recovery, because they don't have to be depressed their entire lives. Just a little tip: to be diagnosed with depression, symptoms have to be presented for at least 2 weeks. So 2 weeks straight, they have this feeling of hopelessness or sadness and things like that. And like I said, talking about depression makes things a lot better, not worse. They may feel like it makes it worse. Eating disorders is another problem. A lot of people think that we only see eating disorders in younger kids, like high school, middle school, and things like that. But college students have eating disorders, especially if they're athletes or something like that, or you feel like you can't eat because you got to study and things like that. Eating disorders are attitudes to food, weight, body size, body shape, that lead to changes in the way a person eats or exercises. I'm not saying you can't exercise or, you know, always exercising. There are a lot of people saying, okay, today I'm gonna go to the gym, I'm gonna go to the gym tomorrow and the next day. That's not the same thing. These things interfere with their whole way of life, you know. Here are some types of eating disorders. Anorexia, starving yourself. And sometimes they can look in the mirror and say, I'm fat, and they can be just as thin, but their view is different from our view. Bulimia, consuming lots of food and then vomiting, trying to get rid of it, you know. They feel guilty about it and want to let it go, to get rid of those calories and things like that. Binge eating disorder. I watch the 600-Pound Life all the time, and sometimes I feel like that's what people have. You know, they're eating large amounts of food. Sometimes they're not even hungry, or you would think that they're not even hungry. But people who binge eat may not even be hungry, they're just eating. So some are warning signs. Fear of eating with others. You can't eat around other people. You know, extreme obsession with health facts and food. It's not like someone saying, well, how many calories is in this? It's not that they're always worried about how much they're intaking. Because some people, you know, count calories, and that's fine. But it's an extreme obsession, you know, with how many. They're writing it down, they're looking at everything, they're taking notes about everything. Hiding food in napkins or pockets. Not because they want to save it for later, but because they're trying to hide that they're not eating. Flushing uneaten food down the toilet. Excessive exercising. They eat really, really fast. Or low self-esteem. Sometimes they're tired, excessively tired. So, like not a normal type, because they're not getting the nutrients that they need. And then frequent complaints of feeling cold. Now, I complain of being cold because I'm anemic, so that's totally different. So when you notice that someone has an eating disorder, or you think that you know someone, first you have to learn all that you can about eating disorders. You can't just go out and try to approach someone. Plan out how you're going to approach someone. It's different with depression. When someone has an eating disorder, they don't feel very good about themselves, and they're not going to want to talk. So it's best not to criticize. If a thin person says, I'm fat, I'm fat, I'm fat, and they may be anorexic, you can't say, well, no, you look great. Eat, You know, that doesn't make them feel good. Don't try to solve the problem. Don't take it personally or anything, because it's really up to them to figure out what they're going to do. Eating disorders are not always about food, or weight, or how people look, but it is life-threatening. So, I mean, it causes heart problems and stomach issues and tears away the lining of the esophagus if you're bulimic. There's no quick fix to this disorder. Addiction. We see a lot of addiction in college students. Not just your random recreation, smoking a blunt or something like that. There's a lot of addiction. There's a lot of drinking and things like that. So drug addiction, drug abuse, chronic or habitual abuse of any chemical substance to alter states of body or mind for other than medically warranted purposes. So not just medical and not just recreational. I'm just doing it because I woke up this morning, or something's going on, so they're doing drugs. If you think a student has an addiction, and that's either to drugs or alcohol, first think, why are they using? Like I said, sometimes they're using because they just want to. It's recreational. It's not necessarily an addiction, but why are they using? Get down to the bottom of it. Remain calm. Don't like blow up at them. I know some professors have done that, like, stop smoking marijuana and come in my class and things like that. You know, it's better to remain calm. Use I statements. Everyone knows what I statements are. Never point a finger, you this, you that. It's always like, I feel or I think. Encourage them to change, because, you know, addiction just gets worse. Never judge them, never criticize them, never tell them they're an addict or anything like that, because it's not going to be good. Like I said earlier, approach is highly important when dealing with students with mental illness. Suicide. This is one of the touchiest subjects when it comes to mental illness, because it is very common. Suicide is the act of intentionally killing oneself. Someone may feel like they're hurting inside, even though on the outside they look perfectly fine. But it's not always that they just want to die. They just want the pain to stop. And sometimes they don't know how to do that, and it will lead to death. So they have suicidal thoughts and behaviors, and sometimes they can't get those thoughts out of their head. So I was told to give a little story. This is not a college issue, but I went to school with a girl who was really happy all the time. We were in band together, always happy. And no one knew how sad she really was. We don't really know. And I would meet her every morning in the cafeteria, and we'd have fun, and then we'd go to band and, you know, hang out. But then one day I came to school and it was really quiet. I mean, it's a small school, but it was really quiet. I was going to Wright City High School. And all my friends are sitting at the table and they're all looking sad, nobody's talking. And I walk in and I say, good gosh, who died? Yeah, that was kind of a dumb thing to say, because that friend hung herself the night before in her closet. And the school decided that the band should play at her funeral, which was really hard because it was closed casket. And so I always felt like I couldn't say goodbye and things like that. So suicide is really a touchy subject for me. So people who feel suicidal, they feel isolated, they feel alone. They start giving things away that they care about. They start, you know, involving in risky behavior. They'll start doing drugs that they've never done before. They'll start driving crazy or hitchhiking, stuff like that. They have a negative view about themselves. If you feel like you know there's a student who might be suicidal, first you have to be aware of your own biases. Some of us are religious. Some of us don't believe that you should engage in suicide or suicidal thoughts and things like that. So beware of those biases. If you feel like you can't approach somebody, find someone else. But act quickly, because they can be here today and gone tomorrow. Be very supportive of how they feel. Be patient, listen to them, and show them that you care. With all of these things, always show them that you care. Never tell them that they're wrong for wanting to commit suicide. Don't tell them, oh, you have so many people who care about you. Things like that. That's not going to help it. Never tell them that you'll keep a secret. And that's with anything. Someone says they want to kill themselves, don't tell them you'll keep a secret. Actually, you can tell them, let's see if we can find someone that we can talk to, someone close to you, a family member, or another professor, or counselor, or someone. Keep in mind that even though you recognize it, they're going to deny it. There are times they will deny it. You might not be able to save everybody. And if you need extra help, here are some hotline numbers that you can use to give to those students, just in case they start denying things or you feel like you can't help them fully with what they're going through. Any questions? Yes.
My question is, how important is it to have like a relationship with that student? Like for me, working in Office of Student Engagement, I just got there about 6 months ago. And so, for example, Ms. Victoria been there for more than a year. So a lot of those students, they know her.
Yeah.
And so how important is that? How important is that relationship? You know, some people are drawn to different people more than others. So is it important to just be mindful that, oh, Miss Heather might have more of a relationship with a student than I might have, and if I know that, like, should I kind of like try to bring Miss Heather in, or should I just try to do it on my own? And I know that, yeah,
that's a very important question. This is the thing. It is, but not necessarily. Some students will come in, they see where you work, and they see that you are someone of authority. So, and especially because for most students, you look just like them. And so, I mean, not everyone's going to trust you because they don't know you, but relationship is important. Get to know your students and things like that. When I interviewed Ms. Nobles, we talked about that, and some students didn't want to go over to the health center here to get any type of counseling. So what she did was she would take them over there. So it's like a passing the student off, introducing that student to the person who they're going to talk to, letting them know you can trust this person, things like that. So you hand them off to that person if you need to. But relationship can be very important. It's not always the most important, but it does help.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome. Any more questions? Well, if you do want a copy of this PowerPoint, I can send it to you. Just let me know. And that's pretty much it.
Hey, thank you.